Hello, everybody. I am excited that you have joined us again tonight. And I'm excited to bring you some, I was going to say old friends. I'm going to say
Careful.
lifelong friends. And we won't talk about how long those lives have been. As you know, we're all going through something we have never dealt with before. And the really coolest part of this is how our dance community is coming together. And tonight I'm bringing together some old friends to talk about old times and maybe a little bit of dance history that some of our viewers don't know about. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thrilled to see everybody.
Hey, Anna Marie, for those who may not know you, tell us a little bit about your school, how long you've been at this.
It was opened in 1951 in a little building that had a little tiny dressing room with a pot-belly stove. And my mother used to sit in there, had a book about this big where she wrote in the lessons, which, by the way, were $1.50 for an hour.
I was going to ask you if you could remember.
$1.50, and it was ballet, tap, and acrobatic.
Oh my God.
All three, ballet, tap, and acrobatic. And I believe my rent was $600 a month in this little building. But if you came in the door, you came into the teaching room. So you had to walk through while I was teaching to go to the little tiny dressing room. So that was 1951 when I opened it. It was a beautiful Jewish neighborhood, gorgeous homes, lots of beautiful people. Now, you wouldn't go in that neighborhood. It's the scariest neighborhood in Wilmington, Delaware right now, which is a shame. So here it is, next year will be 70 years later. And we have this new building, which my great niece Ashley has bought that one. Yeah, so I have been through, building-wise, 6 different buildings, because one I lost in a $3 million fire in 1982. And we lost everything and had to start from scratch again. But I have to tell you, Art, some of the things that survived were the vinyl records in their albums.
The fire, huh?
They survived the fire. They were under a shelf that it didn't, I don't know what happened.
Amazing.
Some of them have little brown around them, but I still have almost every one of them.
Couldn't ruin a Statler record.
No, you can't ruin it.
People didn't know that.
Yep. And
I'll go through anything.
when I first started, I had a piano player, and I swore I would never use records or anything. Well, that went by the wayside, and I did the vinyl. After vinyl, it went to little cassettes, and after cassettes, it went to CDs, and now from CDs, I do it from my phone, so I've been through the entire gamut. Yeah, and now doing it virtually, and boy, is that hard. Have you found, teachers telling you that that's hard?
It is hard. I think it's harder than it was before for most everybody doing it. But I wonder, once we get into the sway of things and understand it a little better, if it will become a little easier, is my hope.
Well, I'm in my 6th week of doing it. It's a little easier. It's just very stressful trying to keep your eye on every child doing it.
Understood.
And it's hard on them being in their bedroom or their mommy's kitchen or whatever alone. It's very hard on them.
And it's even harder on the mothers whose floors their kids are destroyed.
Oh, yes, yes.
That's all I'm going to say. I'll go to Arthur and Nancy here for a second. Tell us a little bit. I don't know how to describe you guys as to your careers. What would you describe yourselves as for viewers who may not know you?
Very happy that we're in this business. Love it.
Well, I'll jump in and say first dance convention, maybe first costume company wear, and Anna Marie will remember this, and I don't at all, but I've seen hand-drawn costumes
Yes,
described by describing the color of the costume.
absolutely. I did that, and there was no Artstone costume then. I would go to it was called Balms in Philadelphia. And I would go and I'd say, I want a sailor costume. And this guy would draw, and then he'd send me upstairs. And then I would say, well, we need 5 yards of red, white, and blue for the top, and 3 yards of this, and blah, blah, blah. I would bring it home and separate it for the 12 kids or whatever in the class and give it to the mothers. Boy, wasn't that a mistake. So those costumes did not all look alike.
I
I
want to say on that, my mother told me that story. She grew up taking dance in Michigan, and that was how they did it too.
That's right.
And they would like come in on the day of the dress rehearsal, and the sequin would be over one shoulder on
the wrong side. Oh,
yeah, it was.
that's for sure.
Yeah,
she and I went through the same thing.
So,
when Art started his catalogs, they were all in sketches. They were not black. They were black and white sketches. And then I think he went to color sketches.
First, I had to borrow money from people so I could afford the color sketches.
wait, I want to ask that question, Arthur. So it started with sketches, and how many costumes would you say that first?
Oh, we had at least 20. The catalog was about 4 pages long.
That's funny.
I was excited as hell.
And so then, so people understand, you started with the 20 hand-drawn pictures. What was the average cost of a costume?
Oh, we had a few at $9.99, and when we sold some of those, I was happy as could be. I thought, "Wow, we're going to make a fortune."
Basically, $4.99, $5.99 was the basic price.
So
Wow.
you started with 20. When you sold Art Stone, how many costumes were in that catalog?
Oh, it could be 700.
Wow.
One of my favorite costumes, when my daughter Ashley,
I know which one.
when the song was hot, the Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini.
Absolutely.
Made a costume called that, and she wore it. And man, everybody, we had movie stars, kids that were wearing it. It was unbelievable. It was so.
That was the largest seller we ever had and the largest running costume we ever had. So one day somebody said, "Is it because your daughter's in it?" And I said, "No. It makes no difference what my daughter's in. It's because it sells every year."
If we make money on it, we'll run it.
I think every teacher used Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny.
I agree.
I wonder if it's still in the new catalog. Have you gone to look?
No.
I just took it out recently.
No.
What a mistake.
The catch to that is, I knew Ashley, in her 30s, and that picture was still in the book.
That's right.
So true.
Some things never change.
I want to ask this question. I'll start with Art and Nancy, then I want Anna Marie to jump in. You've told me the story of the first dance convention that wasn't NADA or dance educators. Tell everybody the story of the bus and truck across the country and the records, but summarize it.
Well, my father and Danny Hochter of Hochter Records and Bob Kimball of Kimball Records. My father had Statler Records, and they wanted to push the records. And my father, they were hired by a guy named C.L. Smith in California for NADA. NADA was the first convention that went cross country to about 4 or 5 cities. But then the next year, the guy that was running it wanted his own records, so he wouldn't hire them. So they started their own, and they did it by buying 2 cars, and we went cross country with them. and Gertrude Hollenbeck and Betty Hochter. And that was the whole faculty. And we went from city to city, no air conditioning in the car. We couldn't afford that. It was hot, trust me.
And so you traveled to these cities in what, did you just say a couple of cars?
We had 2 cars loaded with records and that huge faculty. And we drove cross country.
How many cities?
Can't quite hear you.
How many cities?
We did about 6 cities the first year, 6 or 7 cities. And it went very, very well because local people could now go. Before that, they were only done in places like Chicago and Los Angeles and Dallas and New York and so on. And now people say, oh, we'd like to go to those too. We can't afford to take the planes to go there. So we added Cincinnati and Cleveland and all the other cities. And it was very, very successful.
C.L. Smith was one of the reasons that it became successful because they got all of that advertising from what he called them. Tell them about that, Arthur. The circuses in town and
Oh God,
a bunch of gypsies.
Yeah, tell that story.
Okay, when they started their convention, I still taught one more year for NADA. And C.L. Smith was furious that they had started their own convention. So he said, they're just a bunch of circus elephants. Well, so the next time their advertisement came out, they were dressed as circus elephants. And every time he said something that was not complimentary, they dressed like that. And it was a huge success. I think he made it successful.
Isn't that interesting? And just for the people that are listening, he was the president or director of NADA at the time?
He was. He in Los Angeles, they wanted a licensed dance teachers, and his wife had not only a studio, but she sold taps. Super taps was her thing, and so he said, if you want this to fight this license, you've got to be sound like a big organization. Let's call it something like the National Association, and that's how NADA was born. So when it was all over, the licensing was defeated, and of course he took credit for that, which was not so, But he said, look, there's so many dancing schools. We should really start and do something with this. So he took NADA and made it a dance organization. And that's how the whole thing started.
Do you know when that happened? Was it long before you guys or 20?
It was about 1961 or 62.
Okay. Anna Marie, what do you remember about those first conventions?
Well, definitely I was, listen to this, national vice president of NADA. That was a big deal. Little Anna Marie from Wilmington, Delaware, national vice president. And I believe that this one picture here, that this is Betty Hochter in the middle.
Hold it up a little higher.
Right about where my finger is behind Art is Betty Hochter.
Yep.
Yep. Because that was Dance Caravan Red is in back of us. And we were Dance Caravan Blue in front, in the blue jackets.
Who's in this row of front people? Can you name them?
Yes.
Glacia, me, Linda Gachet, Sue Sibilio on the far end, and Rosemary Menace.
And Nancy, can you remember going to these conventions?
Oh yeah, I really do. That was my summer activity. I first met Arthur when I went to Dallas, Texas. He does not remember that. I do not know why, because it was very memorable to me. But then the next year I went to Jacksonville, Florida, and I took some dance students with me. And so in Jacksonville, he asked me to go out. But of course I had my dance students there, so I couldn't. But we sort of corresponded back and forth. And so he kept, come to New York, come to New York. So I finally got up nerve enough and money enough to say, I'm coming to New York in May. And he said, I'm getting married in April. I said, well, I don't get coming to New York in May. So all that trip.
So
that Dallas convention, Art, if you recall, was the Bible salesman that came into my class, and he was cursing me up and down because we were making too much noise, and they were having a Bible salesman convention next door, and you came into the rescue. This man was heading for me, and you told all the kids to settle down. You called for security, and you rescued me, or that man, I think, was going to come up on stage. And then we went to dinner that night, and there he was upstairs in the same restaurant. And they were from a Bible salesman convention. And the language he had, oh my goodness.
For Bible.
I don't know what Bible he was reading.
Well, I first started with Dance Caravan Red. I was working for Jules and Art, Statler Records and Art Stone Costumes, traveling with Danny and Betty Hockta on Dance Caravan Red.
And I was on Blue.
And he was on Blue. This was...
I want to stop you and ask this question for the people listening. Red and blue, what was the difference?
They had, Danny and my father didn't get along well on the tour, the way they were running it. So they just, instead of just splitting up completely, they said, look, you take one name and we'll take the other name, and then we'll go out and we'll both have a good time. So they went to certain cities, and the next year they switched cities. Blue would go to a bunch of cities one year, and the next year the Red would go to that. And so they survived for about 2 or 3 years, and then they finally split up completely. And my father changed the name from Dance Caravan Blue to Dance Olympics. And we had it for a year, and then we got sued by the Olympic Committee of the world because you're not allowed to use the word Olympics.
Anna Marie has brought show and tell to prove that, I believe.
Yes, yep. This is the one that says Dance Olympics.
Pull it closer to the camera. So you can see Dance.
Yeah.
Hold that there, because I can make it bigger here. See it? Dance Olympics. Oh, hold that up. I want them to see Art Stone with his beard.
With the beard.
I love that. Who else again?
Susabilio.
This one is Blacia and Susabilio on the end.
Tell me about Susabilio. It's a name I don't know.
She's a Massachusetts girl.
Massachusetts, yeah. I think of the town in Massachusetts where she was from. Do you remember, Art?
Foxborough.
Maybe Foxborough.
Foxborough, Marlborough, one of those. It was a borough.
It was a borough or something on the end.
Yeah.
But you know, when we went cross country, it was completely different because this was brand new. And it was almost like a family going cross country. And when we started adding more teachers, we ended up like about 12 or 13 teachers on the faculty. And at night, the girls used to get all dressed up. I would say the guys would get dressed up too, except there were no guys. There were very few male teachers in those days. And I was at that time 18 years old.
I know where we're going with this story, my friend.
Right. So we used to go out at night all together to the same restaurant, and we would march in. And these girls, of course, were all dancers. They had beautiful figures, lovely looking faces, all made up. And I would walk in with this group, and people would come over to me and say to me, "Excuse me, are you somebody?"
Yeah.
Because you're with all these gorgeous girls.
I want to show you Arthur's little harem. This is, we have this picture in New York, but Ashley sent me the, oops, hold on. Can you see it, Ree? There we go.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to make that big. Hang on.
Okay. That's Anna Marie on the end, the shortest one, of course.
Right.
Then Blacia, then my fabulous husband, Arthur, and then Susabilio.
Susabilio, yeah.
And then, can I dare show you the next picture?
Yeah, go for it.
Hold on. You know, I have to work at this. And then the other part of his harem was Joan Yell, the blonde on the end, who was
right
in Hello, Darling.
Rosemary.
Rosemary Menace, the ballerina. Jules, of course, and Bonnie Ardeline.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question, Anna Marie. I know that Arthur dated Bubbles. I know he dated Buttons. I know he dated Susabilio. I know he dated Bonnie Ardeline. I know he dated Blacia. Did you date Arthur, Anna Marie?
No, I did not.
Okay, good.
Mr. Bill didn't let me.
We can stay friends.
But I have to tell you, I remember one night we were having question and answer, and Art, somebody raised their hand, and you said, "Do you have a question?" And this young girl said, "Yeah. Where were you going with Blacia at 1 o'clock this morning?" You remember that?
What was his answer? I want to know.
I don't remember the answer. But everything else was about dance except this girl said, "Where were you going with Glacia at 1 o'clock this morning?"
Back then, that had to be big scandal.
Oh yeah, I am still friends with Glacia on Facebook. That was really good.
Glacia was somebody who was a teacher and then she became a costume designer. Am I right?
That's right.
Yes.
And she and Arthur were dance partners
Yes.
on the tour. Let me just pull out that old picture here.
While you pull out that picture, I'm going to interject because I have one story myself that I can share with everybody. Plus, I'm going to say I took class with Anna Marie Leo. I want you to know that. I took class with Art Stone, but I took Anna Marie Leo classes. I remember Sonny Leo. But this is what I wanted. Oh, I lost track. What were we saying before that?
Glacia. We were talking
Okay,
about Glacia.
Glacia, New York, probably. What was your hotel in New York?
Roosevelt Hotel.
All right, Roosevelt Hotel. This jumpsuit, black with red down the sides. It had a matching jacket. You and Glacia were on stage dancing, and everybody bought that. I had one. Okay, do you remember the outfit I'm talking
I sure do.
I do. And Betty Hoctor said we all look like bellhops. You remember?
Then there was another.
She didn't think of the jumpsuit first.
Because it sold very well.
Yeah, I had one. I wish I still had it. I'd take it to the Antiques Roadshow. Anna Marie, what were you just going to say?
Speaking of that suit, do you remember the blue with a red stripe down, and we all wore them? We all looked like men. That was like a one piece. And Janie Curry had it on, and she was doing acrobatic for Joan Yell. And Joan Yell said to her, "You're very limber for a boy." She said, "I'm not a boy, I'm a girl." But another, I don't know if you remember this Joan Yell story. I love this one. She was teaching acrobatics, and they were doing different tricks. And at the end, she said, "Now, can anyone do anything different?" And this little girl, not little, maybe about 11 or 12, raised her hand, and she said, "I can." So she prepared for a front walkover. She got on her hands, got in the middle of the split, right in the middle, and let out the biggest fart you ever heard. Finished the walkover, and Joan Yell said, "Now that's different."
That's different.
She asked, "Anybody can do anything different?" And she said to that girl, "Now that's different."
Arthur and I were just talking about that today because I'm so glad you told that story because it was just so.
It's a hysterical story. But I have to, I've never forgiven you for one thing, though, Nancy.
Let's get it out.
I never. Do you remember the green leotard with the spaghetti strap?
I do, Anna Marie.
And you mailed me one. Now, mind you, one was good for Susabilio or Rosemary or Anna Marie. One was not enough. So you sent me a second one, and I had to sew them together to make that fit. I hated that green costume, Nancy.
And you wore green harem pants, too. Remember?
And the harem pants.
Yeah, that was one of my better suggestions.
That and suspenders. Suspenders on everybody else go straight. On Anna Marie, they go like this. And Ronald Matty, God rest his soul, he was in line on stage left, and I'd be in line on stage right, ready to go. And he'd take those suspenders and go, "Get it," and he kept spreading his out. He was so ornery. Doing that entrance step part. You know that entrance step, da 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 da. Remember that?
Yeah, dance.
We all did that one. Oh, such memories.
I want to say, Anna Marie, I joined like 30 years later, and I did that step.
You still did that entrance step. We all know that one.
I want to ask about this story. It was later. I don't think Anna Marie was there, but it was the year or two that I taught for you guys. Another New York City, but I don't know if it was the hotel that you just brought up. You had platforms that were so high,
That
because
was the Hyatt.
okay, the Hyatt with high platforms.
That's right.
Thousands of kids on the floor. Frank Hatchett is on the platform. Frank Hatchett loses his balance. Frank Hatchett is hanging on to the platform.
No,
Yes, and
I don't remember
slowly
that.
dropping till he got far enough to drop down on the floor. I will never forget that. And kids in the room were like,
But you know what's great? When you and your brother Rennie taught for us and you used to perform on the show, these two good-looking kids would come out and dance, and every girl in the room would go nuts.
Just a gigolo is what you dance to. And
Uh,
you remember that? When
yes.
I'm walking, I hear just a gigolo, and sometimes I just have to call Ree and say, I'm just living in the past. But Ree would love all the attention, so he would go up on the elevator. Rennie did not like the attention at all, and Rennie would take the back steps and climb up, 12 flights of steps to get to his room when nobody would see him.
This is what made Rennie, I think, only do 1 year, maybe 2. He was the opposite of me. Didn't want to do the autographs. He wanted to teach. He wanted to go be in his hotel room. And I was okay with all the other stuff. We go into a mall, like a food court, and Rennie's eating a baked potato. I remember what he was eating. And this girl lays her ballet shoe right down on the table and says, will you sign this? And that was when Rennie goes, you can do this. I can't do this.
oh, poor Rennie.
Those were the days.
Well,
They were.
Rennie and Ree always seemed to get a room right across the hall from me in the hotel. Every morning they knocked on my door. They had forgotten their toothbrush, left it in the last city. They didn't have their hairbrush. They didn't have this. They didn't have that. So one day I go to the door and I have no makeup. My hair is wet. I'm wrapped in a towel. And I said, what do you need? And one of them said, well, you don't look very good in the mornings. I said, you cannot be very picky because, listen, you need me.
Oh, that's too funny.
And we did
I'll tell you one more story, and then we'll go back to that I remember. Arthur, I have no idea if you'll remember this, but the first year Rennie and I were on the tour, our birthday came during that time. And you came, we're all sitting somewhere eating, I don't know where it is, but you come walking in with this cake box. And you brought a cake for Rennie and I, and you stayed there. They did a happy birthday, and you leave. Maybe Nancy was there, I'm not sure, and you go away. And all of the faculty looks at Rennie and I and says, who are you?
Oh, God.
I said someone special, I guess.
That's right.
That was true.
That's very true.
So tell me this. I'll start with you, Anna Marie. Do you remember walking into your first dance class?
No, I was 4 years old. I don't remember back that far.
What do you remember about being a little child and dancing?
Well, always the short, chubby one, and always put with a tall, thin one. From the time I started, maybe when I really danced like performance-wise, maybe age 8 or 9, always a tall, thin girl I was put with. It was always a tall, thin, and there was Anna Marie. And then doing back then USO shows and retirement homes and dancing at the church carnival and all of that. And that was fun. And I don't know if you ever heard of the Acromaniacs. They were an act in New York, and then they became the Three Little Bakers, and I performed with them. You probably have heard of them. They were on the Ed Sullivan Show and all, yeah. But, and back then it was all tap, 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 tap. I didn't want anything to do with ballet. And then I got this love for ballet, which went on and on and on, and that's what I teach the most of right now, is ballet. But I loved the tap.
Were you also an acrobat?
No. I taught it as much as forward roll, cartwheel, front limber. That was about the extent of me teaching. But I did teach baton. I did twirl the baton. So that was a separate lesson. Another $1.50. Yeah. In this little building, and I go, oh, please, God, don't break the lights.
And
Yeah.
you could probably buy the baton as well, right?
Oh, you could, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Sarah and Nancy, what do you remember either that first dance class or being like walking in for the first time or being like, I like this?
Are you talking to me? Did you ask me?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I was a little bit older when I took my first dance class because I lived in Jackson, Georgia. They did not have a dance teacher. But then this wonderful woman from Atlanta took the bus down and would give dance classes in Jackson and surrounding towns. And my father had just died, and my mother really couldn't afford to give me dance lessons, even though I think they were $5 a month. So Carolyn ended up staying at our house, room and board, and I got dance lessons. So she was my first dance teacher. She's still my best friend. She just celebrated her 91st birthday. We talk pretty regularly and we have a great time. And we always want to get together, but we know we would just drive Arthur crazy because so many of my personality traits are from Carolyn because I grew up with her. She was like my big sister, and everyone was so jealous of me because Carolyn stayed at my house. So that's why I fell in love with dance. And then I ended up teaching for her. It was just been a great life. And your first class?
My dance class was completely different. My mother and father were both professional dancers, and they had a dancing school. And when I was 3 years old, they sent me to take lessons. And I hated every moment of it. And they said, look, as long as you're with us, you can take 1 hour a week. That's all we ask. So right from when I was 3 years old till I went to college, I took 1 lesson a week, and it was a horror show for me. First of all, I was an athletic kid, and I loved baseball and loved all the sports. And when I used to say to my friends, I can't come to practice today, I go take my dancing lesson, they beat the hell out of me.
Oh, dear.
I got to college, and I got a job teaching babies in a dance studio, making $10 a week, which made me the richest kid in school in those days. And then we had a show, and I was the choreographer. And all of a sudden, I was popular. I had dates all over the place because there were no male dancers in the studio. So anyway, that's how mine started. And after that, I loved every minute of it.
Who did you take from that 3 to that age that you finally liked it? Like, was it your parents?
I took from my parents primarily. And then when I got into high school, I went to some professional studios in New York City. And I loved it because there were girls there. And I just wasn't used to this. I'd never seen anything like this. And some big celebrity dancers. So I loved every moment of it. When I got to college, my whole life changed. I went to college in September. I came home. My father said, oh my God, what happened to you? You can dance.
And so making that transition from the sports guy or the guy who was interested in sports to a costume catalog with little kids' costumes, was that hard for you or did it feel natural?
It saved my life because I started teaching for the dance conventions, which took me cross country all summer. But then in the winter, I had nothing to do. I opened a dancing school, and that didn't go that well, so I forget that. So maybe I was trying to do dance costumes, and that worked out great.
Really? So wait, I have to ask, what do you think for all the business owners watching? Why do you think your dance school didn't work out, Arthur?
I guess because I didn't really pay attention when all those years I was taking lessons. I wasn't paying attention, so I didn't have that much to teach. Oh, God.
Oh, that's so funny. Anna Marie, tell me about a teacher who made a big difference in your life, had an impact on you.
Well, the lady that my mother finally found for me, her name was Joyce Potter. And that's where I really danced the most. When I was little, my sister went to somebody who used to come down from Philadelphia, and that was not much of anything. But then my mother found this Joyce Potter, and I danced with her from probably about age 7 until I got married when I was 21. And she really is the one who started to instill ballet into me. After that, my best friend, along with these two, was Ronnie Mahler, still my best friend. And my love of ballet a lot came off of her and still does. Yep.
Wow, that's great.
And
So-
now Sonny, whose real name is George, is named after George Zorich from the Ballet Russe di Monte Carlo. He came down to Wilmington they were performing, and he gave a master class at my studio, and I was pregnant, and he said, if you have a boy, would you name him George or Yuri in Russian? And I looked at Mr. Bill, and we both said, okay. And so we toasted. Well, sure enough, came and gave birth, and it was a boy. And I looked at Bill, and he looked at me, and we said, we promised him we'd name him George, but he doesn't look like a George. I said, well, he's our son, so we'll name him Sonny. So that's how he got his name. But his legal name is really George.
And Sonny is your son, for those who are.
Yeah, and Joe Rowan used to tell people, this is her son, Sonny. She also has a daughter, Dottie. She always called Bonnie Dottie. She'd always introduce, this is her son, Sonny. She has a daughter, Dottie. Yeah, so she was something else to travel with, let me tell you.
Joe Rowan.
Oh,
Oh my, she's still doing it, you guys.
Oh, yeah.
oh yeah, she's the head of the dance department at Oklahoma City University.
Right.
Let's just talk about one thing, because I did it one year. I think she used to do it with Frank Hatchett, the fly swatter dance.
Oh yes,
She did it with
the
Steve
Mort
Du
de
Bois.
la Buzzy. The Mort de la Buzzy, that fly
I
thing.
did it a couple times. Plus, I think she was in her 70s or 60s at the time and was doing Stars and Stripes.
Yep.
With full point. And
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Last year, we were invited to Oklahoma City she was getting an award by the state of Oklahoma for her achievements for dance in the state. And so Debbie D and Arthur and I went out as her guests to be at this award. It was just perfect. And she was just perfect. Well, here she is at her high heels and her very nice shaped legs and has very, very short skirt. And to receive this award from the governor of the state, she looked great.
Now, you know the size of her. She's about as big as a minute. And she was my roommate. My dresser drawers had bras, panties, leotards. Her dresser drawers had Entenmann cakes and some other cupcakes. Food galore. That woman ate like you could not believe it.
You're so right, Anne-Marie, because remember when we used to go to dinner together, if there was anything left, she took it back to her room. So, and then she would put it in her dresser drawers and she would just munch all night long. How she stayed so thin is beyond me.
And the minute we hit a hotel, first thing she did was grab the waste can from the room and she'd go get a plastic bag, put ice in it so that she could put her food. Back then there was not a refrigerator in the room, and she'd put her food in there and she ate all day long. And she got up around 6 o'clock every morning. I'm still in bed, and did a complete bar holding on to the dresser. Complete bar.
Still does that.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah.
But I remember the first time we hired her, our ballerina got sick and we needed another ballerina. And somebody said, take Joe Rowan. We'd never heard of her. We said, okay. So we hired her over the phone. And I drive into the hotel looking for these gorgeous ballerina. And they're standing at the registration to the hotel is this woman in jeans and boots.
Then you have boots on, yeah.
And I thought, oh, if there's a guy that cannot be Joe Rowan, well, it was Joe Rowan. And
it was Joe Rowan.
He became the best
great
we ever had. The best.
I want to say something. I know that maybe she did a dance Olympus. Do you guys remember Beverly Fletcher?
Absolutely.
Yes.
She
The
was
best
one of the,
tap dance in the world.
yeah, she was one of those characters who would go in just whatever clothes she needed to teach in, her jeans. She used to wear tops that would pop up in the air, and she had a bigger belly. And
But you know what? She gave those arms to every tap dancer in the New England area. Her arms were fabulous.
She was fabulous. Oh,
yeah,
Yeah, she was.
speaking of fabulous, one of the other things that made it so interesting, when the convention started to grow, we hired big name teachers. A guy named Luigi, which I'm sure somewhere you've heard.
yeah.
And then let me tell you about Frank Hatchett. When we needed another dance teacher, another jazz teacher. And I said, well, I know this guy, Frank Hatchett from Connecticut. I think he'd be a terrific teacher. So I called him up and I said, would you like to tour with us? And he said, fine, but I've never gone cross country. And which was true. No black dancer had ever gone cross country to teach at that time. I said, no, you'll have a good time. So we get to the first city and he comes down in the morning and said, I am furious with you guys. And he said, well, what did we do? He said, I know you're trying to make me feel comfortable, but this is ridiculous. They were having an NAACP convention in the hotel. He was the only white people in the whole hotel.
Oh, no.
And he was one of the biggest and best teachers ever after that.
My first encounter with him was teaching for NADA in Connecticut. And we go up, and my friend and I on the train go up to Connecticut. Here comes Frank Hatchett, thin as a rail, in a bright mustard yellow jumpsuit from top to bottom. Picture that man in a bright yellow mustard jumpsuit. And all I saw him do was to the sky, to the earth, to the sky, to the earth. That was about the most he did back then. And
I want to
turned out
show you a
be
picture of Frank.
fabulous.
This is Frank
Oh,
by Etta
there
Turner.
he is.
He's on down the road, Anna Marie. I
Yeah.
remember that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that is how Frank looked years ago.
Back then, yeah. This
But
tall, thin.
What year would you say that is, Miss Nancy?
well, this was the year we were still Dance Caravan blue and red because
About the late 60s.
yeah, the late 60s because the Hotchers were sort of courting Frank to come over to their side. So, but he stayed with us forever. But you know, Frank and I sort of held hands and learned how to travel together because I was working at for Dance Olympus, and Frank was working for Dance Olympus, and I was from a little town in Georgia. He was, I think, from Springfield, Mass. And so
It was.
yeah, he had done a lot of traveling, performing, but not really just traveling like this. So we held each other's hands and made it work.
He became really good at it too.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure.
Can I tell you a Mr. Stone travel? You either went in the first group or the afternoon group when you traveled with Dance Olympus. Well, I got the pleasure of traveling with the first group with Mr. Stone, who always needed to be very, very early. So I'd have to meet him in the lobby of the hotel around 6, very early. And he'd say, we probably should get a little breakfast or a snack. So we'd have something to eat. Then we go to the airport. We're still early. We probably should have a little snack or something. So we have the second breakfast. Then we get on the plane. You have something there. Then we get to the new hotel. It's early, not ready to meet that man yet. We'll eat something. This is why I look like this. It's Mr. Stone's fault. I learned to eat 3 and 4 breakfasts every morning.
She's talking
But that
about
man,
Mr. Stone.
your father was a gem, a real gem. There's nobody like him.
Oh wait, so you're talking about not
Jules.
Arthur? You're talking about Jules?
No, Jules.
Okay.
This was Jules. No, Arthur was still in bed. He didn't have to go until the afternoon group.
Anna Marie, I'm sure you ate a lot of oatmeal because that was one of Jules's things.
Oh, did I ever?
Always order oatmeal, honey, because
Oatmeal.
ruin oatmeal.
Yeah. Yeah. He was one wonderful man, let me tell you.
We're gonna have to wrap this up in a couple minutes, but Arthur, I'm gonna, because he's been brought up, What's a memory of Jules Stone in your head that just sticks with you, that epitomizes who he was?
Well, we used to always have our show after every convention, and there were five of us. And five guys would come out. We would dress in women's ballerina clothes with boots on and gloves, and we would do a dance.
Do the four swans.
Did the four? Oh, it was the four of us. I'm sorry, there were four of us. We did the four swans, and everybody used to go nuts when he would do that because he was a very conservative man, but he did it. And they loved it.
And he was in show business, right? He was the
He's
vaudevillionaire.
Mm-hmm.
And you know where he learned his tap dancing? From the kids in the street, because he was here in this country by himself, had no money, and he was like 12 years old, and he learned tap dancing from the kids in the street.
Where did he come from, Arthur?
Hungary.
What year was that?
Oh God.
Or about?
1910 or 15, something like that.
So then he learned to tap dance on the street.
Yep.
And eventually,
I'll tell you something else about that. You know, my father was one that used to rehearse everything. So in those days, the only audition you had was a time step. So he worked on that time step for it. And it was so he went for an audition for a show, and he got in line, and the whole audition was do a time step. And the guy said, "You got the job. You're terrific." So he walked over and he sat and stood there in the wings, and they did some more. And all of a sudden he said, "Anybody here do wings?" And nobody raised their hand. So my father said, "I can do wings." He said, "Okay, do wings." So my father went out and did a time step. You know, if you can make a joke out of this, you must be fabulous. You do a great time step. You got that job too.
Got that job too.
So
And
Jules,
am I not correct? Your father gave your mother a month anniversary gift for his entire life.
Every month.
Every
Because
month.
I remember him saying when they were first married, and he didn't have that much money, but he gave her like a Hershey bar
That's
or
right.
something. A
That's-
month anniversary for their entire life. I'll never forget that, and I think it was a gesture that
he did
just
it
goes beyond
every year.
beautiful.
Every month. The entire time they were married.
I know.
when they celebrated their 50th anniversary, I sent out invitations for their 600th month anniversary.
Is that what it was? That's funny.
How old did they live to, Arthur?
My mother died when she was 69, and my father died when he was about 83.
I was on the tour when he died.
That's right.
And so y'all were in St. Louis.
And I remember saying, "Do you have to leave for the funeral?" And you or somebody said to me, "Oh no, wouldn't want this to stop."
But
And-
I left and went.
Yeah,
Went back to New York, but not to the funeral. We postponed his funeral, you know.
I remember. This is, so if I was only there 2 years, the year before he passed, and I've told you guys this, I'm somewhere, I guess it was New York, because he was looking up and he tapped on the front of the stage when I was done with my class. And I don't know if he knew my name or whatever. He goes, "You're good. You're good." And that's all he said. And I was like, okay, that's Jules Stone telling me I'm good.
Yeah.
I must be good.
He was the best.
He was.
And I'll close this with one more story. Nancy, first I'll ask this. How many kids, let's say in New Orleans, those years that we were together, would you say 1,000, 1,200?
A lot. We had 700 or 800 because at that time we had divided the rooms, so they were just packed to the gills. So easily now 800 to 1,200 kids in New Orleans and Houston. I think you're going to tell a story about Houston, but it may be New Orleans.
Was it Houston where you had the briefcase?
It was.
It's so many years later I'm going to tell the story because you taught me something. I'm sitting next to you, probably just borrowed your hairbrush, and we're at a registration table, and I'm telling you thousands of kids. And back then, people would come up with cash. Some would come up with checks. Sometimes they'd hand you all that their parents gave them to you.
And change.
and change. And so they're coming up to you and they're registering. I have 18 kids and you have your Southern accent and you're like, well, nice to see you, Miss Darla. Thank you very much. And you take that and you put it in the briefcase. And then someone else would come up and it's like, hi, Darla. Nice to see you again. And you put that in the briefcase. And when registration was over, I looked at you and I said, someday I want a briefcase like that.
That's funny.
And
Well,
you-
Arthur,
I did it a couple times when I was running the American Dance Awards. You know, I'd be like, here's my Nancy Stone briefcase.
That's right.
one time, Arthur, you left your briefcase with me in New York with those men with the gun standing alongside of the. Where are you going? You're leaving me alone. This briefcase full of money and a man with a gun. I'll never do it.
At that time,
we used to hire a policeman.
we had to hire a guard
Yeah.
back to our hotel rooms. This was a heyday of convention time.
This was before.
Oh, yeah.
Guards.
And you're right, Bree, about the people coming with Mary Jane's money and Susie's money, and here you laid it all on the table. Some were in like $1 bills.
Always.
My favorite
Yeah.
was a teacher that came to us all the time, and she always brought a lot of students, but she didn't want to be in New York City with her purse and have all that money in there, so she kept it between her boobs in her bra. And she would pull out this wad of damp money
Oh,
and
no.
lay it on the table.
That went in the briefcase too.
It went in the briefcase. It was still
It was
cash.
just fine in the briefcase, but when her students, I used to work the Art Stone booth also besides doing registration. And anytime one of her students would come up, they'd pull out the money. I'd say, oh, I know whose student you are.
Oh, that's funny.
Now you should ask me again. When did you first learn to like dancing?
Oh, my.
Oh, it's been a great life.
It really has.
And this has been a great talk. We got to do this again.
Thank you for having us. It was wonderful.
It's fabulous, Reed.
Terrific. Loved it.
It flew by. I have all of these cards. I had all of these pre-planned questions, but we
Well,
did
if
it.
we do it when I'm in New York, I can show a picture of you and Rennie in your hot pink pants. You had, remember, with no shirt on?
Yes. That was another story. I'll close with this, then we got to end. This is my longest interview so far. Nancy, I think it was, I don't know what city it was. I wore sweatpants instead of these Lycra pants that you guys had given me to wear on the tour. And you came
Oh,
up to
those
me,
Lycra pants.
okay? And I just wanted to wear sweatpants that day. And Nancy comes up, she comes to the edge of the stage. She goes like this. She goes, honey, the Lycra is what we pay you to wear when you teach.
And did you wear it for the next class?
I did. I got it.
See?
You learn quick.
Let me show you the one and only time I wasn't short and fat.
Oh,
This was for the Statler record of Animal Crackers. And that was me and my niece getting ready to put the picture on the back of the album for Animal Crackers.
And
Wow.
And I
your
still
record
have that
always
album.
sold a lot.
Oh my goodness. I still get calls. Do you think I could get a hold of me and my teddy bear or whatever?
I wish.
Yeah, I'll hum it for you.
we talked about that a long time ago, like getting that collection of music, but it's probably long gone now.
Too
Yes.
bad.
Yeah, the good old days. Okay, we got to end this. I love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well
Love
done,
you.
Marie.
Mwah.
Love you.
It was great seeing everybody. Be